I have a reader question that's come in, and I've been asked this question a few times, which is why don't the retailers push back more on comic pro behavior? Or now forget the pro behavior for a moment. Talk about like the various shenanigans that the publishers pull. Why don't retailers push back more since, in effect, they are the customer? They're the ones paying for the comics from the publisher, and arguably they're in the position to actually do something about it. So why don't they? Hey, everybody, this is Perch. Here's where I want to answer this question. This came from a listener to the show, and I've gotten this question many, many times. But I feel like the answers are never very satisfactory. And the people who hear them say they're not very satisfactory. I don't know if I can give you a better answer here, but I'll give it a shot. So, to level set everyone, just so you remember, when a publisher produces a comic, they're not selling it to the end customer. They're selling it to the comic shop. The comic shop is buying it and then turning it around to the end customer. So it's called a B to B to C, business to customer business. And that's very common. That's certainly not anything to do with comics alone. But it's also, I don't want to say dangerous, but it is a tricky situation because it's very easy for the first B, in comics case, the publisher, to lose sight of what the customer actually wants because arguably they don't need to care. If the middle B is doing its job and promoting, getting the comics out there, their target is the comic shop, not the end customer, and they can kind of do what they want. And if the comic sells or doesn't sell, it's a comic shop's problem. They're the ones who are taking the risk in the inventory. But given that scenario, why don't comic shops speak up more about bad behavior? The problem is, I mean, first off, some comic shops do. Absolutely, comments get made, but by and large, they all are ignored. And I think for decades now, comic shops have been taught that their concerns, and I'm not talking about what a creator might say on Twitter, but I'm talking bigger than that. Their overall concerns about the industry. Most publishers could, pardon my expression, give a shit about what they have to say. The comic publishers have a pretty long and established, I don't want to say antagonistic, but let's say not friendly relationship with the shops that are selling their wares. Now, you might say for a moment, why would anyone open up a comic shop and voluntarily stick their head into this noose? Why would they bother with that? Why? What's the point? And I can't answer that question. That's going to be unique to every comic store owner. Some people have dreams of just working this business. Some are lifelong fans, and some people think they can actually do it better and change things from the inside. Some people, that's just a business that they inherited or they got into, and that's what they want to do. There's a lot of reasons why people open up a comic shop, and it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And you are absolutely right if you say it can be maddening for somebody to open up a shop with arguably very little control over the inventory they're selling. But that, too, is not terribly unusual. Many businesses are at the mercy of whoever's supplying their stock. The interesting part is comic shops have also been trained that if you speak up or you say something or you express a preference, that the publisher or the creator, whoever it might be, has the power and the ability to trash you. Comic shops, I would make this argument, and I know this is maybe a controversial take, but if it's your money, if it's your business on the line, then you can run it how you see fit. And whether you're a good businessman or a bad businessman, I mean, that's on you. And I think that in general, if you want to carry something, it's your right. I've heard the counter argument. A lot of people on YouTube have said this: the comic shop owner is, it's the hot dog vendor analogy, or and the same thing goes for the comic creators. It's your customer base is in charge of what you sell, and I think that there's a lot of truth to that. If you are, well, no, not even. There's a scenario where somebody is comfortable selling what they want. There are a couple of boutique comic shops. They focus on indies or they focus on back issues. That's what the store owner wants to do. And customers come in maybe wanting a Marvel book or wanting something modern and current, and they're basically told, we don't do that here. And I think it's that shop owner's right to have that type of shop. Of course, you can do whatever you want and thus take the consequences. If you live in a market where people are interested in new comics and you don't sell new comics, then you're either going to lose money on your business and you're going to have to be okay with that. You're going to have to be comfortable with this approach. In the business, we often call these boutique shops. In the Pacific Northwest, there's a ton of boutique shops, often run by the spouses, or in some cases, the retirees of Microsoft or Amazon. They make a ton of money and they decide, I want to have a shop that sells, handbags from Peru, and I'm going to open up a small shop in downtown, Bellevue or Kirkland or one of the richer areas, and they lose money. And they lose money month after month, and they don't really care. They're rich. They walked away from Microsoft with 10, 20, $50 million, and they're going to run this store and they're going to run it at a loss, and it's their passion. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a type of business. But by and large, most companies, most comic shops do want to actually make money. They are dependent on, there aren't many boutique comic shops of people who have money to burn. There's a few, but not many. Most are trying to make a profit. If you're trying to make a profit, then you pretty much need to sell everything. Now, the challenge with that, as I mentioned, is that the publishers, a lot of the creators, have kind of trained these comic shops. If they speak up, if they complain, they get trashed. And you can see this in all forms. You saw this when people object to a certain comic book selling or saying, I won't carry that. And you saw, social media mobs going after them. You saw these stores getting, Yelp bombed. When a retailer said that they were tired of some of the forced diversity stuff at a New York City Comic Con, which was at the time, if you happened to be there, a fairly passive statement. It wasn't an angry, shouting mob making this comment. It was a response to, very troubled sales back in 2016, I believe, 2016 or 2017. And things were sinking, and some retailers were objecting. And you saw not only creators go on Twitter and basically accuse them of being Nazis and white supremacists, you saw places like Bleeding Cool portraying these people as like hillbilly yokels who were saying all they want were white people in their comics, which wasn't at all what was being said, but they got trashed. And a lot of these stores got Yelp bombed, and they got people saying the store owner is racist and all the rest. And so unfortunately, we've seen that comic creators and publishers will be very vindictive at a comic shop that expresses kind of how they feel about things. And so for a lot of comic shops, they don't say anything because if they're operating on a thin margin, they can't afford to deal with the noise of people within the industry or even creators outside the industry making trouble for them. And in a lot of cases, these creators have been gleeful about calling for, Twitter mobs or doing, endless, posts and comments. I've seen comments in interviews and in videos where they target certain shops, and it definitely has an effect. They get their followers to go there and make business tough. And when your business is already on the margin, you're going to go out of business. So a lot of comic shops are cowed by that and say nothing. And that's a shame. I think you should stand up for what you believe in, but it's hard when you're dependent on this market. It's also hard when there's a lot of nuance to the situation. If a comic shop said, I don't like this behavior, but I'm still going to carry Venom because that's what my customers want to buy is Venom. So, nobody stops to really understand the nuance of that. They just start throwing chairs at you. There's comic shops that have said, I think Dan Slott's blocking behavior on social media is harmful to business, but fans want Spider-Man, so we're going to carry Spider-Man. And they have been trashed by both ends. They've been trashed by the publisher and by Dan Slott saying, you don't have any right to tell me what I do with my social media account. And they've been trashed by the people who are upset saying, you shouldn't cave in, you shouldn't carry his comics at all. I don't care if you go out of business, you shouldn't support it. And it's all a big zoo. But the biggest reason, or the biggest, I don't say reason, but the biggest thing that's going on with comic shops, that I'm not trying to defend this behavior, I'm just saying it exists, it's real. Most comic shops are not on social media. They're not online. They have no idea this stuff's going on. The vast majority, in fact, have no idea this is going on. Now, is that crazy? A little bit. But I was talking to a guy who owns a shop in Victoria, just in the Pacific Northwest. Very nice shop guy who's been in the business for a long time. And I was with somebody else, and I happened to just overhear the conversation. The guy said, "Well, what do you think about this Mark Wade lawsuit issue?" And the store owner was like, "Yeah, I vaguely heard about that. Some guy's suing Mark Wade. That's a shame. I don't know why that guy's suing Mark Wade. It's the comic creators need the money." And then the guy proceeded to kind of explain the situation all right. And I watched the shop owner just like, I don't know anything about that. And I just have no idea what he's being talking about. Like the guy kept having to go back in the story, like, oh no, this is what the guy did. Oh no, this is what happened with Antarctic. And he just having to go back in the story. And the comic shop's owner is like, I'm not on, I don't know, I'm on Facebook, but I just talk about my store. I never hear any of this. And the customer was perplexed and I think frustrated of why this comic shop owner didn't know the situation, why the comic shop owner in some cases didn't even seem particularly interested in the situation. And again, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying it's a fact. A lot of comic shops are not plugged into any of this. So when we ask them why aren't more comic shops taking a stand against bad creator behavior on Twitter, it's like most comic shops aren't on Twitter at all. Like they have no idea. And so should we be telling comic shops you need to be on Twitter and you need to be paying attention to all this? I mean, I do. I think you should understand the business you're playing in, but I get why a lot of shops don't. And again, if you're running at a margin, a very thin margin, when do you have time for any of that shit? To be just honest. So that's the reason why you don't see this pushback. It's a combo of they really have no control over it. The publishers and the creators but mainly the publishers have thoroughly established that if you don't like it, you can leave. And a lot of comic shops have folded and left. But overall, it's like this is what you got to do. This is what we're giving you. You take it or you shut up. And I hate the fact that business is often like that, but that is what we often are playing with. It's a one-way street, and there's no illusions about that. And if you're going to open up a comic shop, you either have to be comfortable with that, or you have to figure out, some strategy for how you're going to work around it, or maybe you do want to change the system from within. That's a little bit me. I want to change the system from within, but it's a fact of the business. Denying it gets you nowhere. And so you can either say, well, it's worth it because I've always wanted to sell comics, or you can, or you can not. I get that those answers are not very satisfactory. I warned you that at the beginning. But that really is what we're dealing with in a lot of cases. So what are your questions? What do you think about the whole situation? And what would you do if you were a shop owner? How would you approach this? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. But most importantly, thanks for listening.